4. Yvonne Lermy, in Funeral Harmony, another one of the cold November mornings. And the reveling world came back to life, tinged with vivid and insane colors. He stretched gray, sleepy, as if absorbed in his own thoughts. Tons of posts had disturbed the autumn stillness. From a mediocre event, an uproar of tweets and likes came out, as if the news of someone's death could be done like this. Luckily, Facebook had invented the reactions. I chose the yellow thing, the emoji with the wow, and found myself satisfied. After all, we remain dreamers in this age of disenchantment. It was after 11 and it was still dark. Turgid clouds filled with darkness were gathering on the horizon, obscuring everything. I looked away from the window. The other one. She never stopped peering at me from the glass, so bloodless, so fragile. Please don't yawn. I kept telling myself for hours, falling asleep on the train would be the end. Please, please, one who was supposed to replace me for the day off was suddenly injured when she was absent that morning. Unfortunate. If she investigated a bit, she could have been found comfortable on the sofa making soap operas with an empty cell phone and a nice bowl of popcorn. The result? Quintals of calls, messages, and even worse, just because for once I chose to give vent to my creative flair by giving up my career. Not that going to a funeral corresponds to this etiquette, but I had good reasons for doing so. My colleagues, my employer, tourists most of all, trampled on my right to rest, not caring about the possibility that those who follow you 365 days a year and possibly 48 hours a day must also afford to live a life. Isn't that so? With cabbage. Customer care first of all. In reality, this happened between 7 and 11. The river of complaints that flowed from my being had resumed its course, gradually exhausting itself, leaving an unbearable sense of emptiness behind it. Now that the work had finished haunting me, I was suspended between worlds, floating between dreaming and waking. After all, maybe it was better not to think about me. The landscape pretended to change. My head dangled. Suddenly something started vibrating on my thigh. I opened my eyes wide, feeling myself without knowing how. Hello? I yawned loudly as I stretched out on the seat. Would that familiar little voice ever stop mumbling the usual mountain of excuses? Yup. I forced myself to take on a friendly tone. After all, it was obvious that my plans had to take a detour, one that blows everything up and leaves behind a sea of course, how not? I ruminated, suppressing a sudden surge of indignation. Are you okay? I'm sorry to have disturbed you, dear. I shook my hair in anger. Thank goodness it wasn't a video call. But today, you know, the commitment we talked about, that you made, do you remember? Was he chewing something? Why do people on the phone always chew something? Hi, Grandma. Yes, sure, I'm coming. Fiddling with my purse, I pulled out a small mirror, giving myself a look. That little woman just didn't want to conclude. I made them dress properly. This inconvenience just didn't take it at. Stop babbling, I begged in thought. It wasn't my grandmother either. I didn't owe her anything. How much I wanted to hang up on her face and tell her, you are my girlfriend's grandmother, not mine. They are Valant as brothers, not mine. I'm busy, and even if I were free, those two would not stand them, even if they paid me. Instead, I laughed out loud. There was no one in the compartment. Oh, what a trill of joy, touché. I didn't really think so. I loved them all. But how to reconcile work and family? Grandmother brushed their teeth, right? I asked as I smoothed my hair. I had forgotten the earrings. Better this way, I would not have lost them. I was losing everything, from lipstick to entire strips of gray matter, from the umbrella to the train ticket. What a careless, Well I'm certainly not here to supervise if those rascals follow Brenda's regime. The mother must have trained them properly, they even started dressing themselves. Okay, a detailed report like the one that followed was not planned. Luckily my brain boasted the hit and run option. I put the hair clip back on tightly in my jacket, the temperature was changing. I thought of Brenda. When you say a goose that lays golden eggs, but then sorry, how did you do it? To do what? Grandma Rickvan asked. I didn't really remember her name. Joanna perhaps, or Jormungandr, to make them obey. I was simply dismayed. It took a few moments for her to understand. Before she had to unleash it, I hoped that the dentures would pop out. Going to pulp maybe in the face of the twins. But things like this don't happen in reality. It would be like delirious. Those two could be terrible beyond belief. Would heaven have deigned to grant me grace? Excuse me, dear, I am of a certain age. Everything is all right? Your voice is trembling. I wouldn't want these two to worry you. Quiet, grandmother, I can look after them. Forgive me, but now I really have to disconnect. I'm getting off at the stop. A few minutes and I'm with you. I hung up with fury. I took a selfie before setting off, then really got off. How cute I was all in black. I wanted to do like the divas of the cinema, glowing hair and curves in the wind. Only it was freezing cold and my teeth were chattering. Clutching under my armpits, I took a few steps into the fog. There was not a damn thing to be seen, and the power bank had long since stopped showing signs of life. As soon as I set foot in that haunted village, an even thicker blanket of clouds threatened to overwhelm me with an icy welcome shower. Oh no, the umbrella, I forgot, again. But what does it cost you to stick one in that damn bag? I passed the bank and post office with the ghostly green windows, determined not to look around too much and not be noticed. Too many reports, too many questions. So I set off down a stupid country path, continuing to mumble to myself. How many other things could I have forgotten? Less stress. More determination. Good. At a certain point I sat on a giant stone. I was all sweaty and the drops were beating my forehead, ruining my makeup. Lost in thin air, I meditated on how quickly the houses had vanished, just as its own inhabitants of Louisburg had turned their backs on the undertaker's family. Willy-nilly I was part of it, and in many ways I too ended up marginalized. Not far away, an immense forest of fir and ash trees could be glimpsed. For a moment I was tempted to run howling like a possessed woman to the gloomy abode and then slam my no in her face, finally obtaining justice. But then I saw the house. It looked dreary and desolate. I knew the clothes were hanging on the back, and even if there was not much light, like that day, it was absolutely forbidden to turn on the chandelier in the living room. It wasted too much electricity, and the impeccable Brenda over the course of those weeks was turned out to be a real stingy tacaña to the last. I panted. Before going through the gate to enter the garden, I heaved a great sigh. I hadn't been able to take a stroll on the train, and had I sat impersonating the good little girl? Well, now I had made at least 2 kilometers on foot from home to the station, trying the opposite route, a gold medal for patience. Positive thinking, positive thinking. I whispered, mortified. It hadn't started raining, that's the positive side. The curtains that morning were drawn, surely not a thread of lie. Yvonne. I heard myself being apostrophized from who knows where. As if mocked by the spirits, I turned to somewhere to my left. Hey! I waved my hand in the direction of the window. Ciao! She made a second little voice, shrill like the first. For a hair I did not lose my balance by sliding on the mud. The two rascals continued to say hello. One more moment and a white goat with Ricola in its mouth would appear, be convincing. I jumped as if someone had attacked me from behind. Quickly, very quickly I turned on the mat. Inches from me a tall young man with a golden complexion and raven hair was staring at me with glassy intensity. I raised a finger, don't you dare to do it again. I scolded him just before swooping down on him, hugging him tightly. The face buried in his jacket stifled a smile. Oh, Thu! I would have slapped him with sincere affection, but instead I just squeezed him tightly to my chest, pulling him out of the clouds. You have a cold? He asked me, looking at me with his usual distracted air. No, because? He grinned. His front teeth made him look like a squirrel with a very long face. It would have been a problem. I hate it when my assistants or whoever they are filming with 10,000 symptoms of some sudden illness. He pretended to cough, apologizing with the other hand. Ah, is it so? Are you kidding me? I punched him on the chest, making him sway. Despite the height, he was very light, like a pure pulvis. A little push and he would have fallen to the ground. What did you bring, Mr. Litwick? My friend almost really fell under the assault of the two wretches. He took Clorinde in his arms and kissed her on the forehead. How is it that you are super fragrant today? He began. Why do we usually stink by accident? Instinctively I thought of Brenda. Cleaning is a must in the Rickvan house. I whispered in Thu's ear, let's imitate them. He suggested, Maman says no secrets. Roland shrieked. No secrets, no secrets. The twin, now back down to earth, echoed him, Ah, don't let your grandmother hear you. The little girl burst out laughing, but Thu added, lowering his voice, and even at Yvonne's, she's a little saint too. Look, I heard you. I beat my feet in the mud and splashed around. Let's clean up. Like me, he had shoes encrusted with 100% organic mud. Meanwhile, Roland had put his hands on Thu's briefcase, pulling hard, almost biting into it. If he had succeeded in the feat, he would have been acclaimed a worthy heir to the Ice Age beaver. But my friend's grip had suddenly become iron, unshakable, and let go. The baby was screaming. Thu seemed bothered by all the noise, and yet he could not help but keep the best of a bad situation. And the twins were bad. Very bad. Come on, children, go inside. Grandma Rickvan peeked out from behind the door, revealing the dark corridor that ended with the grand staircase. He was in a dressing gown. Yvonne has arrived. Make chocolate for everyone. Get moving. Grandmother and grandchildren stared at each other for half a second, then the twins gave it to them. He hadn't accepted the challenge. Throwing open the door, he led the way up the stairs. I want cocoa. Roland shuffled behind her, which has the color of diarrhea, you drank it before. Clorinde shouted impatiently, as we reached down to take off our shoes before entering. Thu and I looked at each other for a moment. How long is it? I asked, getting rid of one of the dark brown tennis shoes, not quite matching the rest, but really comfortable when you have to do the kilometers. He said nothing, leaning against the wall. He seemed troubled. All the same, we can do it if we skip lunch. Have you recently arrived? It's like I'm always here. He answered, do we have to take off our socks too? If you want. But I warn you, you'll leave your footprints. And then Brenda. Aren't you implying that my feet are sweaty? Never pay attention to your nose, cut it out. I almost nearly tumbled down. I won't take off my socks, I announced sulkily, but you could get dirty. He justified himself by making a pirouette on himself. Watch out for the lamp. Pulling him by the collar, I helped him undo that evil button at the top. But how did you put it on? The doctor helped me early this morning. And did you keep it for 3 hours? I began to climb the stairs in consternation, 4 to be exact. But why? He's very dandy. Luckily I happened to free your neck. I thought, far be it from me to criticize his impediments. There were no paintings on the walls, there was nothing, then the plaster had faded with the years. Only a large framed photo of Brenda with her brother Jacques loomed over us. No, I meant the twins. How can you handle them? I can't stand them, they don't bother me. They don't hit on me, it's just that you make them do whatever they want, you have to make it clear who the boss is. It's you, Yvonne. I wish so much. If I were in your shoes I didn't know how to continue. For real? He asked, suddenly dark in the face. Embarrassed, I turned around. They are already talking to the actor. Wake up, Cicino, we are not at the theater, but take them on if you really insist. I don't have 12 hours with them, that's the end of the matter, if Grandma keeps them. From the kitchen came not the scent of chocolate, but of discord. A feud between geese seemed in progress. Grandmother and grandchildren were fighting for dominance. It is not true. Roland was saying, pulling her twin's hair, you drank it all. She retorted, poking her muzzle. If only I had understood the importance of those words, perhaps I would not have laughed so much. Maybe life is all a succession of regrets. I only stopped when thunder broke out. The children covered their ears in fright. The elderly retired teacher almost dropped the pot of tea. I wanted to make barley, he admitted in a tremulous voice with a sniffle. But as you can see, she pointed at the little monsters in panic. Alone I can't. You can't expect me to chase their socks, thinking then that a woman like me, I say, a woman like me. A blow to the chest. Was it time to unleash again? Not in the sink. Not here. The celestial wills heard my plea because with a resounding epithet that sounded like Elvish, she ran to regurgitate the toilet. Thu slumped at the window, silently twisted in two with laughter as I was the only survivor washing our cups at the sink. I had to shake myself. Time passed incessantly, without rest. If only we could have turned the clock back, maybe 7 years. We'll skip lunch. The marketing monster finally communicated, thing? They made the twins in chorus, maybe me too, it's easy for you, you don't eat, like Valant. Shrieked the little one, already. In all that commotion I had forgotten about it, don't name it. Clarence said with a sudden fright, my girlfriend must have been really despotic in the home. Come on, put your little coats on. Thu ordered suddenly authoritatively, scarves, gloves, hats. I went on with the list. No, Yvonne, then are you looking for them when I lose them? Thu muttered not so softly. There was a blinding flash and thunder, in that isolated place. The storms rumbled everywhere. He didn't flinch, selfish. I scolded him amused, will you set a bad example? He didn't even notice. Look, they're coming back. I indicated, terrified. Yup. They have large coats. When they feel cold they will hide their hands, sink their noses in the neck warmers. And they'll ask for more chocolate. Are you listening to me, blockhead? Come on, Yvonne, just talk. Take the crackers, cereals, brioches, a carrot. Every time they break, we stuff something to eat in their mouth and everything goes smoothly as oil. I didn't know you had so much experience with children. Then where is your scarf? No, wait, don't tell me, you didn't want to get her wet, Yvonne, the food, but you take it. I don't have an extendable bag, already done, thing? But, they're coming. He silenced me softly. The return of the twins, accompanied by a grandmother no longer in shock, put an end to our silly bickering. It was funny to see him shake off that softness, that total lack of willpower. I'm going to the hospital at 5. From Maman. Does your tummy still hurt? Roland asked, immediately heartened by his sister, ready for delivery. The little girl chirped with the air of someone who knows a lot. I just didn't understand one thing. How does the sprout get to the hospital? How does the little brother arrive then? At that point I almost fainted. Another one of those things, those Rickman? Brenda's dream would come true. A male child with blood-red hair would go after his father and 2 older sisters, poking his tongue at the twins, at the cousin, and finally, spitting out the pacifier in rebellion against his mother. Stop making a fuss all out. He intimidated the matron by rubbing her hands zealously. Celine's boyfriend has arrived since Sunday, and the great-grandmother moves here, such as the fat guy. What about that stuff we once saw? But how does he kiss her with bad breath? And the great-grandmother gets it on herself in the Latvian then? Respect to little Corrigans. The grandmother scolded them by shutting their beak once and for all. Yet I too was asking myself the same questions. Valente's younger sister, known for her size and bad breath, had changed type twice in a month, and the Rickman's great-grandmother had been bedridden for years with paralysis. Thu opened the door without warning. Everything changed. The memory of the funeral, the cold of November, the awareness of having left her colleagues in trouble, the outside world knocking on the door threatening to tear it down. But how will you do it? The grandmother asked, trembling on the threshold. With this rain and this cold, you won't want to go for a walk in bad weather. Unable to hold back, I laughed in my face. Well, sure, they could always stay and maybe, in the afternoon, be accompanied by Richard. I'm sorry, I mean, from Mr. Rickman. At the hospital? All together? Like a... Thu's light nudge on a tick calmed me. We promised, we'll take care of it. He bent down to receive the kiss on the cheek from the elderly lady, caressing her little heads with filial decency. Let's go by taxi. The old woman's eyes widened. I pay. A few minutes later I was comfortably snug in a cool car seat that I would never have been able to afford. Comforted and perplexed, I had witnessed the transformation of my best friend into a polyglot and unscrupulous businessman. It hadn't been a walk in the park. The seconds spent on the phone in his place giving directions to the taxi driver had upset me. Carrying one child on each lap was getting on my nerves. Equipment. In the initial confusion, I had forgotten to stock up on supplies, and the few supplies Thu had bothered to pull out were quickly running out. Going from Lewisburg to Christhampton in a taxi with 2 screaming brats in their arms in a tight low-cost vehicle and under the universal deluge with the windshield wipers going crazy at moments was the culmination of our downfall. Or maybe, just the beginning. But how to alleviate the torment? How long have you been so rowdy, and you intransigent? Sometimes Yvonne disappoints me, work stresses me, then when they insist they make me mad, you know? In any other circumstance his calm manner would not have irritated me, that perennial calm, inscrutable like none. In fact, we ran a promising YouTube channel with just 80 subscribers, 70 of whom came back to visit us only in the hope of seeing me in profile in some video. Thu used this advantage with the same tactlessness with which she wore a pair of sunglasses every day, even in the rain, to hide the truth. My body was my shield. It hid with grace and daring something that the world could not bear. He did not say a poem. Shut up, soul tired of. How did he continue? If only I remembered lines other than mine. Yes, I wrote too. I composed short stories, novels, and poems. Feeding myself on these enterprises, I gave my all to then be rejected or misunderstood. The channel in this sense offered us a loophole. As the numbers increased, our self-esteem crystallized. We were the spearhead of evil. To every tourist who chose to register, I gave my number. Here are the messages explained, and then block it without remorse, so no, it wasn't him. My friend, on the other hand, had a different attitude towards this hot potato. He pestered people by forcing them to sign up wherever he went. He converted the natives to our creed, a cult of which I was the priestess and he the god, but more often the opposite. The remaining percentage demanded that we cover local events in some way, serving as a supplementary newscast. They loved seeing me reporting and editing. Thu, who had an eye for certain things, made even the less successful videos a blast. Are we there? I pinched the little girl hard, deserving a raspberry full face. Mercy. I hope it hasn't ruined my mascara. Oh no, Roland started farting, Clorinde remarked, holding her nose in a very dramatic gesture. Her clothes were loose-fitting. Her mother always took them larger and saved over the years. The same fate fell to Roland, Valente, and Denise. Celine was a separate case. On her any garment would have appeared tight and shapeless. I was a hottie, wasn't I, to say that we have arrived, said the child, trumpeting in the air. The driver opened the windows. Tremble, little scribble, tremble. You deserve it, he silently railed. We went well, Thu said to the driver. They didn't throw up. Fortunately we arrived. The black man agreed. He had the palest complexion I had ever seen. Take a deep breath, guys, genuine stuff, straight out of Brittany's ass. But will you calm down? Always hard with the children. You should see my parents at home. Don't give up on me for a moment. The driver resumed, addressing no one in particular. Perhaps he was talking to himself with the windshield wipers. Here, he dropped it. He dropped it. Clorinde, don't scream. I tried to overpower her in volume. Between radio and twins, I was about to get a big headache. Then it was you. Admit guilty fart. Always beautiful clothes and snobbish moves, but you do not charm anyone. Valente loves you because he is a human salami. I could not find fault with that. I looked hopefully at Thu, but he seemed asleep, which was impossible in that infernal din. Obey your father, I said haughtily, hoping that for once they had really been listening. Daddy, now I'll come in your arms, the little girl said, exchanging with Roland. Listen to Mom no matter what happens. If you're good tonight, I'll take you all to Burger King. By then he had won. The corrupt twins would purr at the thought of all the goodness they would binge on, while Celine, Valente, and her grandmother would remain in the hospital on an empty stomach. Quiet, they had fallen asleep on us with a dead weight. At least the ears empty and the eardrums in place. I almost managed to enjoy it. I had rested my head on Thu's shoulder and I was about to close my eyes when the infamous GPS said robotically that yes, we had arrived. Honey, I don't want to go there anymore, but dear wife, is our duty to the public. How did you come up with this idea? The children were slowly waking up, and now they were retrieving their things by going down with their mouths shut, a little frightened, a little intrigued by the large multitude of people crowded under the arcades of the cathedral. At moments I expected to see a few bills come out of Thu's pockets. Prepaid card, right? My husband denied, satisfied, arousing the taxi driver's laughter. N26. Okay. The driver waited for the sum to pass from one account to another, then continued. Over the years, worse has happened to me. A single mother with pestiferous children is the minimum. But next time, instead of subduing or corrupting, think about educating your children, so you start well from the beginning on the right foot. If you knew my parents at home. I don't give a damn. I cut it short. The man got back in the car, offended. It was freezing and several faces turned to stare at us. See you, Jean-Paul again." The black man returned Thu's greeting politely without giving me a glance. "You have been inclement." First I film the inside taking advantage of a static position. You will resume the kneelers reaching the coffin and the flowers. You will move slowly but firmly along the aisle. I take care of the outside. Okay, but them? In response, Thu handed his cell phone and tablet to the twins. They know what to do. It's not the first time. Completely dazed, I watched them get to work. But heck, they're only 6-year-olds. And remember, I would never ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Do not waste memory. Every time you are not filming, press the red button so the video pauses, then use the perspective from below and don't forget the wide angle. Roland and Clorinda nodded resolutely, taking one device each. And I asked in my turn. You have the best part. You'll be filming the ceremony from various angles, mostly moving down the aisle without swinging the camera. But did you tell them you can't use the flash in church? Yup. And don't you want the Panasonic GH4? No, Thu explained to me. After, you take it. Be careful not to drop it. Oh sure, among us, I am the one most impeded. I took a sip of gall, trying to shake off that whining version of myself. On the other hand, I had been assigned the most important part, and the GH4 could have gotten wet outside. Putting the video camera around my neck, I looked my friend in the face. He was checking the memory of my cell phone. He smiled, emptying it completely. The night before in the laptop, I had done the right thing. But Thu didn't have time for sarcasm. He was starting to shoot a video. The microphone. She squeaked awkwardly. 2 seconds later I had it in my hand. Not that it really worked wirelessly, but with that I could give myself a certain air of professional. Appearance wins over everything. A steady hand, a crystalline voice, a watchful gaze, and you are moved, but not too much, otherwise they will notice that you are pretending. What do I have to do though? We have never gone to a funeral together, and then we are in through church. In the church I cannot go around the pews asking for statements and interviews. On the contrary, you will move around in patches. Think about your pants. Should I have worn them perhaps? Go Yvonne, go. And without having me repeat it twice, I took off towards a tolerant-looking little family. First of all, introduce myself. Then make it clear why I was there and why I held a video camera and a microphone in my hands. Invite them to participate in the project to finally deliver the coup de grace. Condolences. The twins had disappeared and I had been walking around like a fool for minutes getting to know the faithful. Not a single one listened to me, yet I only had to say my name for anyone to hear me. It always happened. The Lermy case continued to arouse some interest. It had been talked about a lot and for years. Now that a conclusion was being reached, interest was skyrocketing. So it happened that at a certain point it was people who filled me with questions. Hypocrisy or not even a shadow of tact. If I showed any reticence in talking about the death of the day, my interlocutors asked for my sister without hesitation. And those few who deigned to flaunt a minimum of sensitivity completely misunderstood, as if I had never cared about Ida, as if the fact of being the reverberation of another person was not enough. Returning to my place next to Thu, I began to think again. How would she have felt if Yvonne had been in her place, and I dead? Would I perhaps have been more important? We do it for this, I told myself. All of this is for me. The sculptural friezes of this part of the cathedral did not make me forget the ceremony by a whisker. Sitting next to me, Thu pretended to leaf through the program, making it rustle with every page turned. The tapestries here are magnificent. Have you seen the figure of the Angel of Death? He pointed to a point in the direction of the candle holders. Do you want me to read it to you? But where did those two pests go? Here they come. By the way, your cell phone was almost empty. He secretly passed it to me along with a spare power bank. How did you feel walking down the aisle with all their eyes on? It was like being naked. I admitted with embarrassment. The children were chatting close to us. The function was starting. From a speaker positioned just above our heads, an organ began to play at the altar. Clorinde was muttering something to her brother, pointing to Thu and then gesturing about a burger and a big deal. The bishop came forward along with the altar boys. The rite began. In the sleepy afternoon air, the stained glass windows of the cathedral cast soft rainbow gleams, rendered opaque by the gray of the day. By the will of God, we were in an area in penumbra, and behind me was a column. I could rest my head on it with ease in the hope of taking a nap, which became possible given the instant calm that had pervaded the twins. The faithful stood up, spread their arms and prayed, while the bishop, all absorbed in a sermon, invited respect and repentance. It would have seemed the usual pappardella if only I had been used to going to church, but when I hardly ever went there, all of this had a certain charm. It tasted of ancient. We were in limbo, in a place out of time, where famous statues with forgotten names mingled immutably with the thread-like souls of human beings, joining their fingers in contemplation, trying to make sense of the great mystery of life and death. The faithful got up, answered prayers and sang. I remained silent, never knowing what to do. How picturesque were the Catholic churches, full of images, statues, saints. Even the twins had done well in front of the statue of the Virgin, the head sprinkled with countless flowers, the altar saturated with the smell of incense and candles. 4 of us had been the only ones to join the rite. Brenda must have trained them pretty well. I commented with a look full of sincere complacency, "What, they think of Burger King. An evening without Mom and Dad, priceless, but do we have to get up and sit down just every time? Exercise. Listen Yvonne, why wasn't it celebrated in Cinderville, thing? The funeral, sigh. Yep. Something was happening to him, I believe that, announcements? He closed the program, she comes from here, era. He corrected me. Always picky, she only went to Cinderville to babysit. They paid her well, really well, a few coins in exchange for life. Would you be willing to do it? Now you are exaggerating. I thought, I don't know, right. It had to be like this. For me it was normal to live alone, having every moment of freedom as I thought best. It was time to kneel. The entire cathedral was flooded with a great silence. Take. The bishop said, "This is my body." With the help of the altar boys he began to work the great mystery. I was struck by an immense awareness of the solemn moment. When I was a child in Italy, every Sunday I looked in the direction of the cross asking the Lord, "Let me see further, let me see your face crowned with thorns from this kneeler from which I look at you." The Lord did not answer, but I kept hoping. "This is my blood." The representative of God continued, now uncorking a bottle of wine and pouring some into a chalice. I brought my face close to hers, close enough to brush her lashes. I see a shrewd, far-sighted young man. I see a friend. There is nothing wrong with being different. I placed a quick peck on his cheek. You are the only person I would give my heart to. I took his hand and brought it to my chest, without even realizing that everyone had risen, the words of the bishop, the Gregorian chants, the twins pulling us, nothing came within our reach. Although we were on our knees, it seemed that we were soaring high. Very high up, I could feel dizzy. You have me, you don't need God. I whispered softly. When the others are tired and bored, then they will see 2 souls shining. He shook my hands, transfigured by a mystical crisis. And I continued as if nothing had happened. Glistening with rain, louder than thunder, they will see us rise with our talents. Well then I'll have what I deserve. And what do you deserve? What would you like? A little peace. We will make my dream come true. We will become famous, I will be a great writer, and for the first time the world will realize that I exist. Thu smiled as he scrambled to his feet. Like Yvonne Lermy and not like a witness to a case. But I kept this to myself. Our fingers met, while blessed, aware, we let ourselves be enveloped by a feeble ambition, the only thing in that gloomy world capable of giving us warmth, we poor creatures of the night. My lips brushed his neck, as his did mine. I savored that instant, a very sweet poison. So sweet it took my breath away. Look, but they're having communion, wow. It was Clorinde who had spoken. Waving a hand, he was pointing to a river of people about to reach the altar. Yvonne, my stomach hurts. Don't worry, Roland will be over soon. No, that doesn't go away, softly. Aren't you going to take communion? Asked the sister, hopping on the prie-dieu. Her blonde ponytails shone with every movement like Roland's bangs. I can't, I'm a Lutheran, the renunciation of transubstantiation in favor of the presence of the divine. Thu murmured. More to himself than to anyone in particular, but nobody cares what religion you are. If you don't tell him and go to the big fat man, see that you take a piece of bread too, the body of Christ. The loudspeaker was calling. A few more disciples and the bishop would go haywire, but what does it taste like? Roland insisted, stepping on my foot, standing still. You ruin my shoes. It's called Ostia, a few years and you will take it too. My husband said, but put on the others without being a supermodel. Clorinde added. And so together they had allied themselves against me. Anyway, what do I know? I've never taken it. For me it went bad. Once the two of us had a white box in the fridge and wanted to try. But when we drank a little it was disgusting, and then everything turned around. But that was the white wine. But come on. Thu, you are not going? He absently denied, turning the program over in his hands. Yvonne, my stomach hurts. I feel something. What do you feel? What you feel when it escapes you, right? Damn, now that I think about it, I have to pee too. Oops, I had talked too much. No, it's not pee. Hold on, Roland. A few more minutes and we'll be out. I began to shift my weight from one foot to the other. Avoiding thinking of any unimaginable possible liquid, boss escapes me. Now the faithful had really begun to go out slowly, too slowly, but where are they going? I believe in the cemetery. Suddenly alarmed, I noticed something that until then had escaped me. The juncture in which our sentence was marked. What is this smell? Thu had his hands full of equipment and I was advancing towards the exit with the two possessed by the hand. Roland on the right, Clorinde on the left. We had to be in the center of the cathedral because all around us an indefinite number of faces had turned in our direction like the waves of a stormy ocean. Some exchanged a few words. Pointing first to me, then to the children, and finally to Thu, I glimpsed among these sadly known faces, Mum, my little brother stinks. Look at him from the back, he's all brown, he's done it on him, it's disgusting. Clorinde was screaming, people nearby were turning up their noses, an old woman put a handkerchief to her mouth. Look, we were born together and then it wasn't me. And then Roland cried in panic. He tried to hide behind me but without success. His voice finally died in his throat. Just whispers. Someone had desaturated the scene, the world became colorless, the sounds became distant, echoed in the reverberation of the cathedral. Reason lost consistency, the soul was lost, a nebulous eddy of darkness had opened up ready to engulf me in an irrepressible flow of emotions, similar to a heavy mortuary blanket, enveloping me in meaningless spirals. My vision was clouding. In the ensuing frenzy, Thu was pushed aside and finally pulled aside. We weren't alone, others imitated our behavior less than 2 hours earlier by pulling out their mobile phones and starting to shoot. Taking pictures without even removing the flash. A circle of faces had formed around me. I stretched out a hand. On my knees, everything looked blurry, colorless, as if all this was not happening to me but to someone else, a film. After all, life had never been like living, not to me. It had come down like a veil, a dark and painful corollary capable of annihilating all light. The earlier chaos faded into a pale memory. She was here. What are you afraid of, Yvonne Lermy? Tell me what could set you free. No, say that. She attacked me, her auburn hair floating around her shoulders. Candies, then free me. The amber eyes, the face so similar to mine. My face, you're not the prisoner here. I replied by regaining control of myself. He pursed his lips, so bloodless and cruel. Release me, I said. She repeated undaunted, get out. I yelled, astounding the onlookers. I beg you. Frightened, they struggled between the urge to stay and enjoy the show and the desire to follow the funeral towards the cemetery. What we wouldn't do for the public. I remembered. Shut up, soul, tired of enjoying. Suddenly I was aware of the rain out there, of how my condition had not stopped the course of events. They had to go to the cemetery. The body would be laid. A shadow stretched out its hand towards me, moving away from the glimmer of light. A mass of brown hair swayed in the fury of the wind. I moved my fingers. All I could feel were the disheveled curls that adorned my face. Then she shook my hand and helped me to get up. The other was gone, evaporated in the November mists. I'm Kirsten Raveson. We finally meet,